if it works. Okay, it worked. We're live. Yay. We're back for another episode of Self-Care is My Job. And as usual, I have some amazing people that I get to talk with on this show. I'm so blessed to have people either reach out to me or that I have this amazing network of people that I'm able to connect with about self-care and wellness and getting the information out there that people need to hear about taking better care of themselves. This is Sara Verre of Behold Retreats. And we're going to be talking about psychedelic healing, the benefits of psychedelic plant medicine. So, just putting that out there from the get, if you're just hopping on or if you're just listening, like this is where we're at today. We're taking a turn into a very, very interesting new type of healing modality that intrigues me, quite honestly. I have very minimal experience with plant medicine aside from marijuana, right? I mean, even that is just like I only recently feel that I'm able to experience the full benefit of weed. I think a long time ago it was just like I'm fucking paranoid and that's it. But it's phase of life, like things change. But anyway, this is part of why this topic really, intrigues me. So, Sara, I just want to thank you for reaching out and for joining me. I'd love to just know real quick a little bit more about you so you can tell us about your current offering and the retreat. But I would also love to know, like, how did you end up doing what you do? How did you end up here in a nutshell?
Oh, well, thank you so much, Samantha. I'm really excited to be here because psychedelics have been an important part of my self-care, actually,
Yeah.
and my journey to taking care of myself. So, yeah, I work with Behold Retreats, and I am a facilitator there. So I work on retreats in Portugal and the Netherlands with different medicines. So psilocybin, ayahuasca, and bufo, which is from a toad, which we can get into maybe a little later.
Right.
So I work with our healers, and I hold space. I'm also a transpersonal coach, and also yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, energy worker. So all of these modalities come into play while on retreat for integration and for people to go deeper on the actual retreats themselves. And then I also, with Behold, I help our guests before and after the retreat. So I have a nice onboarding call with them, find out where they're at, how we can help them prepare, and then afterwards check in to see how they're doing and to provide any integration tips. So yeah, that's basically my role with Behold. And yeah, a lot of people ask me sort of like, well, how did you even get into psychedelics? It's
Right.
such
Like,
a
how did this all happen?
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have, like, 5 years ago, I would have never thought that I would be here, to be honest.
Right.
I came from a very corporate world. I think like yourself.
I can relate to
um,
this for sure.
yeah. So I was working my whole life really. Um, I wouldn't say for someone else. I would just say I didn't really know what my purpose was, and from the outside, it was really great. It looked really great with society and my social circles, and for my parents, for me to get this, really nice, stable corporate job. Especially growing up in Toronto, where it's a finance city, work hard, play hard kind of vibe. And but I was always someone who left to I was always like considered like the free spirit hippie sort of one, and I would just leave for a year and I would go backpack and live in different countries and take different courses and study yoga, and this was always a huge part of my life, and but I never gave it any sort of professional ideology. I was just That was just one part of me. But then it just became clear throughout my 20s that this was actually me. This was me, not
Right.
the other side. Yeah. And it was hard to let that go. And the way psychedelics kind of fused into that was I had a relationship for a very long time. And when I met him, he was struggling deeply with anxiety and depression. Lots of panic attacks on different pharmaceutical medications. Um, And that relationship was really, showed me the way psychedelics can heal, because about 3 years into the relationship, we were actually in Amsterdam, and, we had a psychedelic experience with mushrooms, or truffles, actually, and that was just the first sort of paradigm shift I saw him have, and it was just right in front of me. All of a sudden, he just saw himself and his relation to the world in a completely different light. So afterwards, we talked about this, and I helped him with the integration of this, so through meditation, and also just whenever he was having a panic attack, let's go back to that moment. Let's connect to what that space, that perspective. And it was a series of events like this with psychedelics over the next year, that really just completely changed him. And it was within this year, he was a different person. He was off medication, no panic attacks. And 4 years later, now, we're still very good friends. And he is shining. Like, he is so successful. He's so happy. And it was the most inspiring thing I think I've seen and I've been part of. And I think that's when I finally realized the therapeutic uh, strength and power in this medicine. Before, I had just seen it as more like a recreational thing, because I had only taken mushrooms recreationally and, cottages with friends. But then when I saw the way it could help him, I knew that in combination with all the other things that I loved, that I really wanted to just devote my life to helping people with this medicine and all the other beautiful tools that can be used, like yoga and breath work, and in conjunction with these, it can be very powerful as well. So it just all kind of made sense. And then I had my big psychedelic journey. So there's, how we work with the medicine is a ceremonial sacred space. So it's usually, for example, with mushrooms, it wouldn't be recreational. It would be a higher dose with a guide and blindfolds and music. And I finally had this experience myself before I moved to Amsterdam. And this was the life-changing moment. I was like, "Oh, I see. I really see." This experience was so profound for me. It was by far the most spiritually meaningful experience I've had. And that the next day, I knew I'm moving to Amsterdam. I'm quitting my job, and I'm devoting my life to this. And then synchronicities after synchronicities, and I'm here now. So.
Beautiful story. Oh my good. And I can
Thanks.
obviously relate, like, on a lot of levels. Like, I have, like you mentioned,
Mm,
even in our quick convo before hopping on, yeah, I have a corporate background. I was in publishing for 10 years, in the city here, and, commuting every day, doing the whole grind. And I had a different, entrance into realizing that in some ways that wasn't me.
mm,
I had very much bought into the lifestyle fully, and then that came to an abrupt end because I was laid off when I was about 8 months pregnant with my first child. And it was like I had no intention of leaving corporate ever. Like, I had no intention of being a stay-at-home mom. I had no intention of leaving. Like, I had put all my eggs into that basket of that career, like that was it.
mm,
That was Sam. Um so, but, as much as that was a annoying experience to say the least, looking back, obviously in retrospect, it gave me an opportunity, as tough as it was and as hard a season as that was, to kind of transition out at the same time as becoming a new mom. Um, that was my opportunity to reconnect to myself eventually. And obviously threw myself back into my yoga practice as a form of managing a lot of anxiety and um, overwhelm that I was experiencing at that time. And, yes, bringing it back home to the idea of self care and healing, things become more, not only, do you feel better, when you're taking care of yourself, when you're finding what types of self care, work best for you, you're taking care of yourself, maybe you're more clear, maybe you're more conscious, as well as feeling better physically. And then slowly but surely, yes, able to come back to, "Oh, wait a second. Like, I not forgot, but I had let go, for example, of some very big parts of myself. The fact that
Mm,
I love to sing and I love to write music. So started to bring that in small doses, and yeah, like, so, little lights start to go off, like, oh, right, like, I am shelving, like, all of these things, all of these aspects of myself that
mm,
are like, screaming to come back out because it's really who you really are.
mm,
And intuitively, these things are a part of you for a reason. So I really, really relate to your story. And but getting back to the actual topic at hand
mm.
of these plant-based substances that are therapeutic and beneficial in so many ways. Like, I have so many questions. I'm trying not to go to, like, the very specific ones, right? Because I feel like a lot of people wanna know, like, in general, like, how does this work, right?
Mm,
So, I'm intrigued to know, like, what a retreat or a ceremony really looks like soup to nuts,
yeah.
including the fact that you're guided by people who are experts. Because I know a lot of people, if they were to attempt, even if they were curious, even a little bit about experiencing this, there might be fear, there might be some resistance. And there's also so many like portrayals of this of any kind of trip, right? There's so many
Mhm.
portrayals that we're given of a trip like that being this like wacky doodle experience where you're
Yeah.
seeing things, and
Yeah.
it's also portrayed in a way that illustrates that what you're seeing or thinking isn't real. So I think we
Mhm.
should talk about that too, like
Mhm.
differentiating, like, almost like, okay, well, is it real? Is it not? Where is this coming from? Right? So start with
Yeah.
like what the actual ceremony looks like and feels like
Mhm.
to a person,
Yeah.
and like the safety aspect, and then we can talk about like kind of, yeah, like what people's like sort of misconceptions that we can kind of, dig into.
Yeah, great. No, I think those are both two really important places to start with. And so I love that you brought up safety because this is very important. And this is something that people overlook or they're just not educated on. And this is something we really focus on.
Mm,
So it starts right at the beginning. It starts with the discovery process. So at Behold, we have a very long interview at the beginning just to make sure this person is ready, in the right mental place, has the right support systems, because you don't want someone coming on this retreat who, has a lot of work to do, is not stable, because that can be very dangerous. So we
mhm,
do work with those people by pairing them with coaches and therapists, but it's not a place to enter this space. So we first go through this and make sure their intentions are not just to go get high. It's to heal or to
mhm,
grow or to connect spiritually. So this is sort of the first process. And then we have an intake form, which includes medical and physical conditions, but also psychological conditions, as well as family history and any traumatic experiences or important things that need to be known. And this is then screened by a doctor, for both the psychological aspect and the physical. And so, one thing I could advise for people who are looking to do this work is if you are not being medically screened, it's a really big red flag
mhm,
because this is where the dangers come up. If you're on certain medications or have certain histories, and are not supported in the proper way, and you're not tapering off medication, for example, this can be fatal even. And
right.
this is where you hear like crazy stories of people having psychosis and things like this, is because the screening hasn't been done properly. So
Right.
we put a lot of focus on this first. Once that's done, then we encourage most of our clients, all of our clients actually, to work with a therapist or a coach before and after, because it is like soul surgery. It's deep psyche work. You are going into the depths of your soul and even into your past, like ancestors energies and trauma. So this is something we encourage everyone to go do their work, because it's not like a magic pill that's going to fix everything. It shows you and it illuminates this path and these things that need to be worked on inside, but you still have to do the work. And so that support is super important. So we encourage everyone have someone they work with, whether it's a psychedelic integration therapist or coach, or someone they're already working with that they trust and that they can work with the material before and after. So we have that extra layer of support. And then they'll usually have a call with me to help them prepare. And then they'll arrive on the retreat. Usually, we have retreats all over the world. So wherever they are, we encourage a little bit before just to land. And then we have a week-long retreat, usually 6 nights. And the first day is just sort of orientation, getting to know the group. We work in really small groups, which is another huge thing that I would recommend, because private work or small group work is provides a much safer space for you to, like you said before, not have as much fear and resistance in the process, because you're in a safe environment with less energies kind of being thrown around everywhere, more one-on-one focus. And so we get to know the group a little bit, or if it's a private retreat, you just would get to know the healer and the facilitator. And then the ceremonies usually start the next day. And it depends which medicine you're using. So Bufo, for example, which is 5-MeO-DMT, this comes from the toad. And this is one of the most powerful experiences ever, I think you can have. But it's very short. It's only about 20 minutes. So
interesting.
yeah, very interesting. But it is the most intense.
I don't know why this like image is coming up for me. Like it's like Nightmare Before Christmas, like the frog's breath. Like I don't know, like that's like I can't get it out of my head now.
That's so
But
funny.
but yeah, like very intriguing.
Very intriguing. Bufo is a very special medicine, and a lot of people choose to work with it because it's so short and because they don't have to go to the jungle and puke for 7 hours with
That would
ayahuasca.
intrigue me. Yeah, because
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
like, and I'm like everyone else, right? Where I would think to myself, yeah, that's probably one of my biggest concerns if I ever want to recreationally try anything is how
Mm.
long am I going to be out
Uh-huh.
there?
Yeah,
And having
no,
the control of being like, okay, now I'm back in my body, you know?
yeah. Yeah. Well, Bufo is something that I would, it's not really a recreational kind of
Right.
one because of the intensity. So always recommended to have a guide or a healer, because the healers also can work with the energy when this experience is happening. And yeah, it's really one of those ones that's like super hard to ever explain. But the ceremonies typically are bufos because of the intensity. It's usually more private work or small groups. So you would have your session by yourself. Even if there's 4 people in your group, you would still do it on your own. And then following something a day like this, we would have, sharing with the healers and facilitators to integrate a little bit, some time in nature, journaling. I always encourage creative activities. So whatever that is, it's so powerful for integration. And then we usually do breath work, and really with the intention to release and integrate. And this brings up a lot of things. And then we'll have energy work that's done as well. With something like ayahuasca and psilocybin, the ceremonies are quite different. So they're usually in the evening, and psilocybin's around 4 hours to 5 hours, a little bit, can be a little bit longer, whereas ayahuasca can be even longer than that, up to like even 8 or 9 hours. And that's done at night. So the day would look a little bit different in that way. And then again, so each retreat will have typically 2 to 3 ceremonies, depending on the medicine. Bufo, you can have even more if it feels right. So it's really just one of these bespoke things in the private retreats. Group retreats, it's usually always 2 or 3 ceremonies. And then in between those days, you have the opportunity to do yoga, breath work, meditations, things like this. Sometimes we have like in each location, we have special activities like horseback riding or cold water exposure dips and other healing, modalities. And then there's always an opportunity in each retreat to have sharing circles with the group, because this can be a really great way of mirroring off each other, supporting each other. And yeah, that's pretty much how it looks like from a general perspective.
I think it's really
So,
nice that you have this, you know, just putting it out there, right? The fact that not only is it a sense of safety that you're being guided, but that you
mhm,
have that, like, these people are committing to a week of healing where they're
mhm,
able to integrate. Because I feel like what
mhm,
happens is you might have an experience and then not, I mean, I'll give my own experience, right? Like, not
mhm,
having, not even, with plant medicine, just in general on my healing journey,
mhm,
like, not
mhm,
having a forum as I up level or as I awaken to something, not having the space to integrate what I've learned and what I've experienced and have an opportunity to share it and vocalize it
yeah,
with people. I mean, I talk about all the time on this show about the importance of a community
mm,
and actually, like, having a group of people or a circle that you can trust, that you can really be you with, right? That you're not just in this, like, trauma bonds, like, bitching and complaining type of energy, but, like,
yeah,
you can have real deep conscious conversations with. And that's where that co-regulation and integration can happen. But so many people will have an experience. They are somewhat committed to a healing journey or their well-being. So they'll do some form of, trauma resolution or um self-care or therapy or whatever it is. But what happens when you leave the office or the whatever that you went to for this therapy or what have you, and you have no one to actually co-regulate with
mhm,
on that deep level about what your experience is. So the fact that you have an entire week to not only integrate but to actually practice yoga and breath work and, like, just be there and let it simmer, I think is such a big deal. Like, actually
yeah.
committing to that healing space for yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it is when you are there and you're in this safe environment, and you're not on your phone. We don't allow that. You're not allowed to connect with that world. It's really like a full disconnection. You're here. You can share with the group, or you don't have to, because some people, prefer to do this a little bit on alone, but they're free to share with the facilitators and the healers. And during a ceremony, there are a lot of bonds that happen in this group setting. And we also make sure on the retreat itself that everyone is feeling super safe. This is really important. And having someone who can administer the medicine, who's highly experienced, and then hold the space energetically, is also important things to look for, because there are issues, especially in South America and Central America, because it's becoming so westernized, people wanting to take advantage of that. And like I mentioned with the medical screening, there are also people holding space and serving the medicine who are not experienced and
Mm.
who do not have your best intentions in mind. So it's really something to do a lot of research on, is like, who's the shaman? Have you talked to previous guests? Really, like, do some due diligent research, because reviews on the internet aren't enough. Um, so that's another element of safety. And then also, one thing we look for with our guests, and when we accept them into our program, it is about being committed to this healing journey for not only
Mhm.
that week, but also after, because the integration doesn't stop. When the retreat ends, the integration follows. I mean, it took me months to integrate my ayahuasca experience, and even longer with Bufo. And it's a process of commitment. So knowing that, our clients are supported after, and they're going to work on it and work with someone to help, you know, keep them accountable and aligned with and this also helps them make like sustainable changes in life, because there's another thing that could happen is, you could have this huge high after a retreat, feel like on top of the world, like my life has changed, and then it can like dwindle down. And to prevent that from happening, again, it's all about integration. How are you going to integrate everything, that 2 week period where you felt so good? What was it? What was it in there? What that you loved about
Right.
yourself and the world? And how can you bring that and actually keep that going? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to lose that. It definitely
Hmm.
is, right? It's just like anything else, like you
Hmm.
let life sort of take over again, and that's fine, and there's sometimes it's just it is what it is.
Hmm.
But yeah, having I think that that's where the real magic happens, that you can come back to exactly what you're saying, like come back to whatever that new awareness was that you
Mm.
didn't have before, that you can come back to again and again and again. But you definitely need support to be able to do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not easy
Yeah.
work alone, because
No.
the brain chatter is way too loud in most
Yeah.
I mean, again,
That's
speaking from
true.
my own experience, like I just got this like, you know, shithead on my shoulder most of the
Same.
time, just
Yeah.
going, you suck."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just an example, right? But
Yeah.
how do like in that moment where things are when you're not in that high, elevated
Hmm.
space anymore, and
Hmm.
the old trauma comes back
Hmm.
in, like how, yeah, you need support in those to navigate that.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
sure.
huge. But so yeah, I think that I'd love to talk about, so that's what the like the event
The
or
journey.
overall looks like sort of from the
Yeah.
outside, but like what's going on the inside? Like
Yeah.
what's happening?
Fascinating things. Fascinating things. So there's one, I like to start this by saying that there is no two similar experiences. Like everyone is going to have a very unique experience. And this is why I also tell people, because it's very important to set intentions with this work. The medicine really responds to intention,
Mm,
but how it's going to respond might not make any sense to you in your logical mind. And
mm,
so some people go in with certain expectations because they heard from a friend or they watched a video and they're like, oh, I want to meet this entity and I'm going to see my loved ones and I'm going to have this experience. And it's not like that at all. Everything is so different. So, for example, Bufo is very experiential, I would say. It's less of a visual experience, it's more of this feeling of connecting with something that is so indescribable that I still can't describe it at all. It's like a force and a power and a inner truth and knowledge, I would say, of
mm,
connecting to this greater force and this oneness and escaping the ego. And it is an ego death.
mhm,
And it can be challenging to let go of that ego. The ego death can be a really hard moment.
mm,
And it can be blissful and peace and love, but can also be releasing things through the body. So it's really one of those things that it can change even ceremony to ceremony. Um, Similar feeling of entering for sure, but it is something that I would say differs based on where you're at, how much you need to release still, how strong your mind is. This all influences the Bufo experience. Um, and throughout the week, also things can happen, reactivations or insights, other like pieces of information just come through and things keep getting released through the integration work. And I mean, I even had downloads of information like 3 months after I had Bufo,
mm,
and it was clear that it was directly linked to that. And it's like this deep soul's understanding of something about the nature of reality and yourself and God, so or whatever you feel or believe in. So that's bufo. And again, this is more of a shorter experience. And you can have various doses with this. So usually the healer will work with you to kind of see what makes most sense to start with. And if you want to change that, have a bigger dose, maybe some micro ones to get you comfortable with it. So that's it's a very unique experience. Ayahuasca, well, my goodness, that can be such a range. Like some people don't even see things. They just puke for a whole ceremony. And this is not to be like looked down upon at all. It's what needs to be done. Ayahuasca shows you what you need to see. And maybe what you need to do is face your inner resistance and face fear and doubt and shame and guilt and just face it on and allow it to come out of the body. If you have years of trauma stored in the body, if you have, you've been on all sorts of medications for many years, ayahuasca is going to work physically through you and help you release that. So you could be having a purely physical experience. You could be having a purely emotional experience. Other people might see things. They might speak to entities. They might, relive moments of other people's lives, their lives, might relive trauma, might just feel connected to universal love and something beyond. It really is so vast. It's so hard to
It's
really.
super
Yeah.
intriguing because we're talking
Mhm.
about, I mean, granted, obviously, a plant can come from a lot of different places. I'm sure you
Yeah.
guys have a whole system for where you source everything from, but
Mhm.
meaning I'm sure, it can be sourced from different places, which means that I guess if you have different strains and different variations, that
Mm.
can be, attributed in a way to different experiences. But we're talking about the same plant genetically that has, is that the right word?
Mm.
That has a different effect on everybody. Why? Because
Mhm.
everybody is different in themselves. But then
Mhm.
you can't, I mean, for me, I can't help but think to myself, well, obviously everybody needs something different.
Yeah.
If you're talking about
Yeah.
the same medicine being administered to the same to in the same doses, in the same,
Yeah.
structure
Mhm.
to very different people who have all different experiences. Like everybody
Yeah.
needs something different, obviously.
Exactly, exactly, and I mean, you could be on a retreat with 3 ceremonies, and ceremony 1, 2, and 3 could be completely different with the exact same medicine.
Right.
So it is a journey, and it is something like you said, everyone needs something different. And you might not even know what you need. You might not even know whatever
You
you're
might
about to
think you know
be
what you need,
shown.
but you actually don't
Yeah,
know what you need.
exactly. And that's just the ego. That's just the ego,
Yeah.
And the ego will try to hold on. Again, it's like this fear of losing itself. So
It's
there's
really
can be
hard to surrender
resistance.
to that. Like, just for the for anybody who's listening to this, like, what are they talking about right now? Like, that is, like, you hear about, surrendering to, and in yoga philosophy, right?
Mhm,
Non-attachment, like, just
mhm.
sort of being in this understanding that, like, we're taught that we're supposed to know it all and we're supposed to be in full control of ourselves on every level, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's really not, that's not the case. So, like, I think that there's an element to this type of experience where you have to be okay with that surrendering. The fact that you are not, and even knowing that, like, if you have trouble in that, which admittedly I can absolutely fall into that category. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm a, hyper diligent and super vigilant person in some cases, and I'm a Virgo, and I like structure, and I like answers, and I like to have a plan. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
so, like, I get that, but and so not only coming into it with an element of surrender, but maybe you it's like it is a practice of learning how to surrender. When you bring yourself into an experience like this, it's like, here's surrender boot camp. Like,
Yeah,
you're not,
yeah.
like, you're not
So
have I don't know why this keeps coming up for me too, but
it's
as a
so
mom, and I'm
true.
always like bringing it back to that here and there on this show, you know, childbirth is coming up
Mm.
for me. Like the fact that like
Oh.
you and I tell, I try not to have too many pointers for other
Mm-hmm.
moms, because every experience is different once again, but like,
Yeah.
obviously birth is like this very transformative, like insane fucking experience that
Yeah.
you can plan for all you want. And then D-Day is whatever
Not what
happens,
you expect.
happens. Like
Yeah.
you can plan, but you have zero control over how this is going.
Yeah.
I don't know who has control, but it ain't you and it ain't the baby. So, and it ain't the
Yeah,
doctors
yeah,
either.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
so
so
anyway,
true.
just kind of like understanding that, yeah, this is a letting go. And obviously just in healing in general, like that is the theme. That is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
overarching theme.
It's so true. Like I love what you said about like surrender, letting go boot camp, because that's definitely what it's been like for me.
Okay,
And
good.
it's yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and every time I surrender more to a psychedelic experience, I surrender more to life in general. And it really is like so beautiful
Yeah.
to see that process, and not having to control the outcome of things, and not having to like, do things for, it's always good to have goals, of course, and to strive for something, but to hold on to an
Right.
idea or something like this or what it should be. Um,
All the
Psychedelics
shoulds.
really, yeah, the shoulds,
I mean,
exactly.
I've even done some minimal like market research about what people want to let go of and what comes
Mm,
up. I did this last year where I just like polled a whole bunch of groups to see like what do like what do you need to
mm,
release? And it was expectations, self-doubt, and guilt.
mm,
So it was like again, the overarching theme is letting go, but it all comes down to that thing of expectations, and so that's
yeah,
ego. Like, that's,
yeah.
like, the fact that we're all handed these expectations. We absorb what is modeled to us or, like, what is deliberately told to us, right? We
Mhm.
try to strive, and we try to stay in our lanes, and then it's like and it all comes down to expectations, right? So, guilt
Yeah.
is, um I stepped out of those expectations. I'm bad. I stepped out of those expectations, and so on and so forth. It all comes back to that. So in a way, I'm just trying to like kind of bring it home, like
Mm.
bring it to more of like
Yeah.
what maybe this could be a way in which this could be beneficial to someone who is feeling
Mhm.
that in that
Mhm.
realm, since that's such a common theme of like,
Yeah.
I wish I can just let go of all of
Mhm.
these shoulds and all of these parameters that were set for me. And I wish I could break out of this fucking box. Like, even if
Mhm.
you know, want to keep a little piece of the box, like that's okay.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's yeah, like, I guess I just wanted to say that because it's coming up for me as in like a way in which someone who might be listening might see it as beneficial to do something like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are very common themes we also see with our guests. And something with psychedelics, it even if you're not having this ego death, because I mean, a lot of people do on retreats, especially with, ayahuasca by the third the third ceremony at least. Psilocybin mushrooms are a little gentler, but again, you can still have these ego deaths. But there is something that happens with psychedelics and on a a neurological level, what happens is there's something called the default mode network in the brain. And this is sort of the control center for all self-referential thoughts, for past and future thoughts, for basically the egoic mind lives in the default mode network.
Mm,
And people who have anxiety or depression or any sort of like they're stuck in these thought patterns.
mm,
You can see in studies in the brain, the default mode network is highly overactive, and the same circuits are just repeating the same thoughts over
mm,
and over again. What psychedelics do is they shut that down so that all of a sudden the brain is free, the ego's gone, And all of these new neural pathways are firing and new neurons are being formatted. So now you might see things from a completely different perspective. And with integration work, you can really rewire your brain. You can take those new pathways and you can work on them
Mm.
and strengthen them so that your perspective changes. And so this is from the neurological level what happens with psychedelics, which is why it helps a lot of people in these clinical trials who suffer from anxiety and depression. And then from the more spiritual level, I mean, I guess some people who aren't spiritual and they do psychedelics, I think once they have them, they see that there is a spiritual element to it, whether they like it
I
or
mean,
not.
even spiritual, like, people even have, like, different perceptions or reactions to, like, what that means, even the word, like, even the theme
Exactly.
spiritual.
Yeah,
So, just
exactly.
to, smooth it over, it's kind of like we could just be talking about, like, what is your connection to yourself? Or what is your connection
Exactly.
to something bigger than you? You might have
Exactly.
even when I say, something bigger than you might have a very visceral resistance to even that concept, and that's okay.
Mhm.
So, okay, so if
Mhm.
the power here is in you and not
Mhm.
outside of you, that's
Mhm.
wonderful. That's part of
Mhm.
any, that's part of most belief systems ideally. But,
Yeah.
like, so just strengthening that, like, strengthening your
Yeah.
connection to that. It
To
doesn't mean you have to
yourself.
become a spiritual person,
No,
like, or
not at
whatever,
all.
like, or you have to start, preaching your spirituality to people or whatever. Like, it
Yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah, yeah,
mean that.
yeah.
It just means, like, how can you connect further to yourself? How can you dive
Yeah.
deeper into yourself so that you feel, like, integrated as a human, as
Yeah.
opposed to just kind of like, I'm a little over here in this box of my job. I'm a little over here
Mhm.
in my family. I have all these floating thought bubbles all
Mhm.
around all the time, and
Mhm.
that's just the way that I go through life.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly,
I
exactly.
mean, if
It's an
that worked for you, good.
exploration.
It does not work for me.
You're right, though. It's an exploration of the inner world and of consciousness in general, if you're
Right.
curious about what the nature of consciousness is. And so, in that element of it, out of the scientific world, there's a lot of things that can happen. And for people who are struggling with self doubts and being stuck in these places of expectations, I mean, it kinda just lifts the veil off of everything,
Yeah.
and it's like, "This is it, actually," and then it's really comforting because you're often faced with such deep self-love, actually,
Right.
when you see what's really there and, all the things that, you may have thought were important, you're shown these different new perspectives on them, and you can really put yourself in this different picture, this bigger picture, and I mean, I think for myself, for example, um, my journeys have really helped me with this guilt, self doubt, and setting expectations. Um, and like, of course, there's work to do with that, but it comes down to a lot of this like releasing first of the emotions. So
Mhm.
that's something we do a lot also with our preparation coaching is working with emotions and being able to accept them and release them as opposed to shoving that guilt all the way back down in the body.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and
Most of us
you'll
are trained very deliberately to run from every uncomfortable emotion.
exactly. And psychedelics, well, they tend to make you face them
You
all.
you you can't.
No, they're there, and they want to be seen and dealt with. And then after, you feel lighter. You feel like there's literally a part of me
So that
been released.
would you say that that is one of the, like, most top line benefits of this? The fact that
Mm,
if you have a hard time connecting to your emotions and completing that cycle of an emotion and
mhm,
following the full arc
mhm,
of an emotion so that you can learn, so that you can have a
mhm,
release at the end, that's probably
mhm.
one of the best benefits, is that this will facilitate that or help.
Yeah.
But, like, I only say that because I know that a lot of people, like, I always try, obviously I could just use myself as an example. The reason that I do what I do is
Yeah.
because I've never had much of a problem with that. That's always been, like, I was the weird one, right? Like, I was the
Mhm.
weird one because I wanna go in. I wanna
'Cause you're
dig
like, "I
in
wanna
deep.
see
I
my
wanna go
fear."
into the emotion. I wanna
Mhm,
know what's going on with you. I want to, yeah, I wanna follow that arc type of thing,
yeah.
right? But most of us, or a lot of us, are taught so deliberately to cut it off, right? And to run in the other direction.
Yeah.
That, and this is not to say that somebody is like more evolved or not. It's just a matter of it just explaining that, it just normalizing that it's not easy. It's not easy
Mm.
to just say, "Oh, I would really like to be more conscious," and like, dive into that. It's going to there you still have the resistance for the exact reason you were just talking about, the fact that you have a default mode. Like you don't
Mhm.
have even like these um like neuro pathways that even allow you to go down that route, because it feels
Yeah.
so unnatural,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
you're
and you
gonna get
spend
pulled
so
back
many
every
years.
single time.
Yeah,
So
and you're
you need
so many
support.
years with social conditioning.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh god, it's
yeah,
so many
yeah,
things.
and it's so hard. But yeah, so, yeah, you're very right about that.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back. I mean, even with your own personal experience, it was so nice, so good to hear. And I don't know, it stood out for me when you talked about your former partner in the beginning, who had the experience
Mhm,
of coming up all off all of his. Well, I don't know if you mentioned medication, but having, severe panic attacks. I've mentioned briefly on the show before, but like my husband has a similar experience
mm,
about 3 years ago, or a little over 3 years ago, when my second, child was I was 8 months pregnant with my son, was like his not his first, but probably his, like, 3rd or 4th panic attack that I had experienced him having, but the worst, and we
mm.
ended up in the ER, and it was awful. Like, we had
Oh,
to, like, we were this close to not admitting him, but he was this close to admitting himself to the psych ward of the
mm,
hospital, because it
wow,
was so, just to, like, like, make it a thing that we talk about. But so, and now, admittedly, and this is another thing, because I know there's gonna be a lot of people who are, like, so resistant to this experience. My husband is a
mhm,
person who, even though he is a caring, conscious person who you can have a good conscious conversation with about what's going on, he would be massively opposed to this. I can tell you that right now. Because,
mm.
and again, this is just my own personal, experience in life,
Yeah,
but, there's just been a lot, I don't wanna say misinformation, but there's just been a
yeah,
lot of portrayal about what this
yeah,
stuff does to
yeah,
you and what it's like and
yeah,
whether it's right or wrong. And
yeah,
there's so, and we have differing views, obviously, on plant medicine.
sure, sure.
So, just kind of bringing that home, like, when you're, you know, say, dealing with somebody who could so benefit from, I mean, first of all, you can't make anybody
Mhm,
do anything. So let's just
no.
leave it there. But, just the simple fact that there are people who struggle in massive ways mentally and emotionally that can benefit from something like this, where
Wow,
potentially they are also releasing their dependency on pharmaceutical medication. Again, not that that isn't required for some people, absolutely,
yeah,
to function, and that
yeah,
should be available, but, just kind of maybe talking for a minute about how, like, even if how often you've experienced that with some of these people that come to the retreat, of how often this type of medicine can help.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I am a such a strong believer of this work, and it has been used for thousands of years by our ancestors, for this exact reason, for healing. And the thing about pharmaceuticals is, like you said, people do need them, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't have them, but a lot of the times they're just solving at the symptomatic level.
Mhm.
The root level, the root cause is where you need to heal. And psychedelics are like like a catalyst into that spot. It's like you want to see it? Here it is.
Mhm.
Here it is, and here's what you got to do now to solve it. And I have seen people, you know, it's like years of therapy in a week. Huge transformations because of how profound, because you can read all you want about, you know, a certain perspective, or how you should let go of things, or how, you can read things and hear other people give you advice. But psychedelics do is they make you feel it. You
Mm.
feel it and you remember that. And then you
Right.
can go into that. And so it's not this like short-term solution. It really is this like profound, long, life-changing effect, because you're just taken out of this tunnel, this cycle, and you're shown this new perspective that's now yours to keep, and
Mm.
yours to make something from. So for people who are, suffering from this, it is such a profound experience. And I do recommend doing it in a safe space, because these experiences that people hear about, these crazy experiences, that comes when people aren't doing it safe, or with someone who knows what they're doing, and they're taking too much. Setting, dosage, these three things are so important. And if one of them is off, set being the mindset, setting being who's around, what's the energy like, who's guiding everything, and then dosage, of course, is how much you're taking. But all three of these factors play such an integral role of creating a safe space for you to go deep into your subconscious, and for you to come out and not be re-traumatized, or seeing all sorts of crazy things that freak you out. So when you have the proper guidance, and it is honored and respected in a safe space, because it is sacred medicine, then I really truly believe that most people can benefit from it.
Mm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Um, it was interesting to me when you brought up the vomiting with ayahuasca. Because I know, like, obviously, that could be something that you're like, "Why would I wanna do that to myself?" Right? But what came up for me
Sure.
when you said that,
Mhm.
like, 2 things, because like I said, my experience with this is minimal. I did microdose with a friend not too long ago, a few months back,
Mhm.
for the first and only time,
Mhm.
and it was, like I said, a relatively small dose. She complains later that what she procured for us was not strong enough, and obviously didn't know that until after the fact, and I'm, like, over
Mhm.
here, like, "Yeah, for me, that was fine." Um,
Yeah.
but, um but it was a great experience. It just happened
Mm.
to be pouring rain that
Mhm.
evening, and we literally, like, rode our bikes around her neighborhood in the rain. And, it was just kind of like a nice, calm, like, experience, but ultimately, because of the rain and everything else, like, COVID, everything, we stayed in, like, we weren't ready to, like, venture or anything like that,
Mhm.
and we listened to music. I mean, this is somebody that I've been friends with since middle school. We're very, very close, and we know each other, on multiple levels. We listened to, music from our childhood. We cried a lot. We laughed a
Mm.
lot. And what I explained after because we did, you would say we did this recreationally, but
Yeah.
the
With
goal was in
intention.
fact to connect in some
Yeah.
way and just kind of like settle in more to ourselves.
Yeah.
So, and she had experienced this several times. So this experience was very much for me. And but there was a lot of crying. So like,
Mhm.
we were sitting outside on the bench, like, and she has like a lot of nature around her, and we're just crying in the rain. And then we're listening to fun, like old music in her room,
It
and we're
sounds
laughing
beautiful.
hysterically, and then we're crying. So I
Yeah, yeah.
explained later to people that I felt like I was very much on multiple, like, levels at the same time, and I was like, it was almost like that needed to happen, like, I needed to oscillate
Mm.
between like, different examples of release. So there was
Mm.
either laughter or crying or
Mhm.
dancing, and I
Mhm.
didn't really put all of that together until after. But it was
Mhm.
definitely giving me an opportunity, because as much as I talk about self-care all the time, and I, promote the idea of moving your body and dancing and intuitive movement and just getting weird
Yeah.
and making weird noises and singing and crying, and how important crying is, and having your release, and I talk about these things all the time, but it isn't as if I'm not a person who might still have some resistance to literally doing those things, like, in in in
Yeah,
continuum for 4 to 6 hours. Like,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
obviously, that isn't what I do with my life every day.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
because there is, and hey, if I wanted to cultivate an entire day of doing that while my kids are at school, I probably could, but I don't. So, this gave me an opportunity for a lot of release.
Yeah.
And in my crying and so on and so forth and releasing, there were answers that revealed themselves to me.
Mm.
There were
Mhm.
themes that came out, and I wrote some stuff down that was like, for example, within my relationships, there were things that came out that were like sort of directing me towards like brutal honesty, and like, like, so it was almost
Yeah.
like some guidance into like being just even more vulnerable and even more authentic.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, I just wanted to kind of like throw that out there as and that's why I was connecting it also back to the idea of the vomiting, because I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
talk a lot about, like we said, letting go on this show and releasing.
Yeah.
And as much as most people, I think, associate, I mean, obviously there is discomfort to vomiting. We can't really
Yeah.
like pretend that there isn't.
Yeah.
But what I have guided many of my clients into, as far as their crying, before we get to that, is the fact that
Mhm.
most of us forget or lose connection with the fact that crying, as much as because most of us were taught that it's like bad,
Yeah.
in one way, shape, or another, but it actually feels really good when you cry.
Mhm.
It's like an
Mhm.
internal massage. Like, there's just this very like serious,
Yeah.
if you really let it go, like it's like it
Mhm.
feels actually really good. So that should tell
Exactly.
us right away that this is not a bad thing, right? Just like, actually, sex and orgasm is 100% considered a release, whether it's pleasure
Yeah.
or orgasm or whatever it is. That's a release. It
Yeah.
feels really good. We know that, but yet somehow we are not looking at that as like any kind of like, you know, therapeutic release, just like, oh, it's there kind of thing as an
Yeah.
option.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, so when you were talking about the vomiting, that's what came up for me, was just like, I wonder if like, I mean, I feel like even now I can connect to how in a way it actually could feel good,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
if you
no.
kind of got out of your own way with it,
Yeah,
you know.
no, it's exactly that. And not everyone vomits. Some people just they'll vomit energy, or they'll just
Right, right.
cry, or they'll cry, or they'll yawn. And with psilocybin, for example, there's no puking usually, but it's there's a lot of crying. And like you said, it is a release, and it's healthy, and it's good, and you want this. It's the purge in ayahuasca is this release of energy that's been stored in the body, and it's been taking up so much of your energy subconsciously, not even knowing, to store that and keep that down. So by
Mm.
releasing it, you're allowing things to come out, and then you feel so much better, and the insights come, and everything becomes clear, and you feel lighter, and you no longer are trying to keep all this inside. So yeah, it's exactly what you said, yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, you know what? That's what we all need to do, is just like purge of like what is,
Yeah,
holding us back, and what is just, yeah, like you said, taking up so much of your energy to
yeah.
contain and squash. Um, so I'm sold. Um,
Great. Should come on a retreat with us.
fully sold. Yeah, no, this has been, in the back of my head for a while, doing something like this. And I had done very minimal research as far as like, like what the ideal mode of getting there is. So,
Mhm.
and we can go on for days, right? Because like what was
Yeah, for
coming up for
sure.
me was like also people who suffer from pain,
Yeah.
as far as having that release, and then having a freer flowing of energy.
Mhm.
So we're talking a lot about mental wellness, and this as a therapeutic approach to establishing mental wellness, and even in your physical wellness, like, just bringing it home, the fact that
Yeah.
much chronic pain is
Mhm.
actually going to be pertaining to some kind of like an emotionally stagnant energy,
For sure.
and or yes, like a need for a release of trauma.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
just kind of like putting those two things together before we kind of start to close down our conversation, even though we could go on for
Yeah.
days and days.
We could.
Really, really. But um I love that we brought it to a place of release and we made that really clear, like, like and the fact that you mentioned, sort of lifting a veil in that way. I
Mm.
remember being in my yoga teacher training, and that was probably one of the most profound things that wasn't even from one of our books, right? That
Mhm.
I gleaned from my yoga teacher training was when my teacher started to talk about, it was actually technically pertaining to the first sutra of like,
Mm.
now our practice begins, because the now is like, I remember her explaining it like, like this is the real now, not the
Mhm.
now that you're viewing through. So it's not just, oh,
Mhm.
now versus you're being present versus being in the now versus being in the past or future, right? It's like the now, meaning without the veil of perception that you see the world through every day of your life, like the
Yeah.
like reality, right? Like
Yeah.
um so when you said that, that's what came up for me, was just like, how lovely would it be to have support in getting there? Because again, that is
Mhm.
easier said than done. That is
Yeah, of
not
course.
something where you just go to a few sessions of therapy and now you see the world for what it is.
Yeah,
Like that is
exactly.
the healing spiral that we're just all on, and in some way, shape, or form. So, hey, anything that can glean us some clarity, we can't deny the benefits of that. So this has
Yeah.
been a really
Yeah.
amazing conversation. If there's
Aw.
anything else that you want to make sure that you either include or to like bring it on home in any like end note, I just want to give you the
Mm.
opportunity to do that.
No, no, but I also really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you so much for facilitating it and allowing me to share a little bit about what we do, and just educating people, because yeah, it's growing and more people are coming and seeing what it's all about. So knowing best practices and how to protect yourself and make the most out of the work is really what we want to educate people on.
So you mentioned that there's retreats all around the world through
Yeah.
Behold.
Yeah. So in places that it's legal. So Costa Rica, Mexico, Netherlands, and Portugal.
My brother-in-law's from Portugal, and we've been trying to plan a trip to see
Oh.
his family. Maybe I need to double dip in that trip
I think that
eventually.
would be a great idea.
Um, so tell us where we can find you online, and where people
Yeah.
can, just read up a little bit more on if they're intrigued with this, with moving forward with something like this.
Yeah, so you can visit us at www.behold-retreats.com. And there you can find a lot of actually educational material in our blogs. We post a lot of really useful information. And you're also free to book a discovery call there with someone from our team to see if this is really right for you. But I do encourage you to like take a look through the website and educate a little bit first and see what's there. And yeah,
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much again for
thank
such an enlightening
you.
conversation.
Ah.
Um, if you are listening and this was intriguing to you, or if you're watching, what have you, and you'd like to go ahead and share this episode with somebody who you think would be intrigued with this similar topic, maybe you'll subscribe on our YouTube channel, Self Care is My Job. I would appreciate that. And again, I appreciate you, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Sam.
Again, I'm sold. I'm in.